Anyone who knows me well enough knows that I'm a huge Star Wars fan. The fandom began when I was a youngling, and I still am to this day, despite stuff like this. Or this. Or hell, even this. That's right, let's not pretend the originals were perfect. As a matter of fact, the video game adaptations of the Star Wars trilogy ended up being a lot like the movies themselves. Simultaneously really awesome, and really frustratingly flawed.
The engaging heroes, the horrific aliens, the terrorizing Imperial forces. Do you have what it takes to take on the Empire? Find out with Super Star Wars, available now.
The Super Star Wars games loosely follow the plot of the films while making grand detours to accommodate action gameplay. Why simply buy R2-D2 and C-3PO at a flea market when you could instead mow down scores of heavily armed Jawas and take them by force instead? Just a reminder, this is our introduction to Luke Skywalker, a 19-year-old farm boy with no combat experience whatsoever. The thing that most players will no doubt notice right away is that this game is freaking hard. And not hard in a good way, like a nice ripe avocado or a sexual joke you were expecting me to make. Hard like every stage being saturated with fast, endlessly respawning enemies that will chase you down like demons until you are good and dead. I mean, there's a boss fight on the first level, and it's the freaking Sarlacc monster. Luke has to fight the Sarlacc on the first level. It took Boba Fett like 30 years to beat that thing. The enemies in these games are absolutely relentless. I've never felt a game that truly hates the player more than the Super Star Wars trilogy. But that being said, the Super Star Wars trilogy does have that je ne sais quoi that made Super Nintendo platformers so charming. I don't know if it's the great pixel art or the feeling of swinging a lightsaber, but there's just something really fun and cozy about these games. That is, when these Lovecraftian horrors aren't trying to kill you. Super Star Wars definitely has a weird pacing, but then again so did A New Hope, so I guess that tracks. You'll spend at least 2/3 of the game on Tatooine, fighting sand people and giant scorpions that unleash even smaller scorpions, and hardly any time on the Death Star. I mean, come on guys, at least let me ambush those 2 stormtroopers, strip them naked, and put on their clothes like in the movie. I mean, if I don't get to defile a corpse, then what has all this been for anyways? Super Star Wars makes good use of the Mode 7 software that made games like Super Mario Kart so visually interesting. The second level uses it for a land speeder ride, and it definitely helps break up the gameplay a bit. On the search for old Obi-Wan, you're gonna kill a lot of Tusken Raiders.
And not just the men, but the women, and the children too.
R2 and C-3PO are like, how the hell are we supposed to get over there? I love that these stormtroopers are just falling from the sky and landing perfectly. This character select says that Chewbacca is 200 years old and that Luke is 5'9". I don't know if either is canon, but I thought it was interesting that they included it. Chewie doesn't get a secondary weapon like Luke's lightsaber, but he does have his own dedicated button just for growling, which I think is well worth it. Okay guys, look, let's not make a scene. We don't want the Empire to find us. Let's not blow our cover. Conversely, the Death Star level is pretty much completely devoid of stormtroopers and is instead full of these scary alien robots that don't really look like they should exist in the Star Wars universe. Also in this level, you have to dodge these TIE fighters that take up 90% of the screen and fly by at 200 miles an hour. Yeah, that seems fair. As you progress into the Death Star, you'll get chased by DJ Roomba, who's out for blood.
DJ Roomba!
You'll have to avoid these smashy ceilings, which, I mean, why would they be designed in such a way? And you'll have to fight this teacher who's trying to give you detention. I didn't do nothing, teach. How about you give detention to D's nuts? Hahaha, school sucks. The next level has you scaling this extremely large shaft.
You're damn right.
The boss this time is the tractor beam itself. Obi-Wan's just like, dude, what did I even bother getting off the ship for? Strangely enough, there is a cutscene where Obi-Wan still fights Vader, but then it just cuts to Luke and company escaping on the Falcon, without ever showing the duel. So my running theory is that Luke has changed the timeline by shutting down the tractor beam himself, thus saving Obi-Wan and creating a whole new chain of events. The surface of the Death Star is another chance for the Mode 7 pseudo 3D graphics to shine, and boy are these textures seizure-inducing. After blowing up the Death Star, which pops like a fun little balloon, you'll get to attend your award ceremony. You have brought freedom to this part of the galaxy, but be careful, for the Empire might strike back.
Ha-ha!
Also, who the hell are these guys? How'd they get on the stage? Security!
You begin the adventure as Luke Skywalker, battling through the icy caves and plains of Hoth with your blaster and lightsaber. Then, jump into your snow speeder to defend the Rebel base against the amazing Imperial walkers.
The Empire Strikes Back starts off with what is probably one of the hardest opening stages in any game I've ever played. Not quite Ghosts and Goblins challenging, but still. Pros: right away you get your lightsaber and a tauntaun. Cons: everything else. You will be absolutely swarmed with these ice pigs, yes, ice pigs, mini wampas, even the local flora and fauna are trying to kill you. How do you survive in the unforgiving Arctic conditions of Hoth? By being a cold son of a bitch, that's how. You'll fight the Wampa for your first boss of the game. It's a bit more appropriate for a first boss than the Sarlacc was, but they also decided to make the Wampa the size of a freaking 2024 EV Hummer. Weirdly, this time around, they got rid of the name of the boss and just started calling them Boss. Which is a shame, because how else would I have known that I was fighting the Lava Beast Jawenko? Another exclusion is the character select screen, so now you don't get to play as Chewie anymore, which is bullshit. After exploring some ice caves and destroying a probe droid the size of a 2024 Chevy Silverado, yes, I'm doing that joke twice, Luke will yeet on out of there with some extreme tobogganing. After getting a taste for the thrill and danger of ice tobogganing, Luke decides this tauntaun just isn't fast enough for him, and he'll need to ride his speeder bike indoors, which seems like a safe and fun thing to do. The Battle of Hoth is here, which means it's time for more Mode 7 pseudo 3D gameplay. Honestly, it all looks pretty good, except for the AT-ATs. They kind of just look like they were awkwardly inserted onto the footage with Microsoft Paint. The freaking arrogance of the Empire here. Hey, do we need to send, like, some TIE fighters or something to take down this Jedi Knight in his armored ship? No, just throw a couple of dudes with pistols and jetpacks at him. I'm sure it'll be fine. Back at Echo Base, Han Solo has to make his escape, and one might begin to wonder when the rebels had time to install so many elevators into this hastily assembled cave fortress. The level ends with a fight against an AT-ST. Sorry, Dash Rendar, looks like Han did it first. Leia looks so done with Han here. Hey darling, I defeated dozens of stormtroopers and this AT-ST to save you. Yeah, that's great, but did you pick up the milk from the store like I asked you to? The Super Star Wars games takes a lot of liberties with the Star Wars universe, creating all sorts of original monstrosities for the player to fight, so Dagobah seems like the most appropriate place for that sort of thing. Unfortunately, we mostly just get frogs and bats. And also, whatever the f this is? What is that, a giant swamp monster or my ex-wife? I mentioned how in Super Star Wars, my theory about how Luke created an alternate timeline. Well, so far this game has been pretty true to the source material, but for some reason, Lando isn't there to greet our party once they arrive in Cloud City. So, I'd like to think that this is the alternate universe. So, forget the warm welcome from the movie. You thought Los Angeles or New York was a tough town that swallows up young aspiring souls and spits them out? Well, try going to Bespin, where the city literally tries to kill you. This has got to be bad for tourism. What are snowtroopers doing in Cloud City? Come on guys, we got you all sorts of different outfits, don't just wear the one everywhere. But I like this one, it's cool, I get a little cape for my face. Well, looks like I spoke too soon, guess you can play as Chewie, blasting the shit out of these Ugnaughts. Hey, do you remember those insect people from the movies? No? Me neither. F it, put them in the game anyways.
I should go.
Who's ready to fight a giant lantern? I don't think the developers ran out of ideas here. Why would you say such a thing? The fight against the Slave One is pretty cool. Oh no. It's angry, disappointed Leia again. Why didn't you save Han, huh? You had one job, Chewbacca. I swear I have to do everything myself. Meanwhile, Luke arrives in Bespin to save Han and the gang, but first, he's got to go through all these snowtroopers. Yes, I still see they're snowtroopers, even though you've tinted them red. You guys had the sprite work done for stormtroopers already in the last game. Why didn't you just reuse those? I love how delicately Vader swings his lightsaber. He's such a little dandy here. Adding to the alternate timeline theory, Luke doesn't get his hand cut off, and Vader just kind of pounces away like a little kitty cat. Congratulations, you've beaten The Empire Strikes Back. Here's a still image of a disturbed Yoda staring directly into your soul.
Feel the Force with Super Return of the Jedi. The final and greatest chapter in the Star Wars trilogy. For the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
Wrapping up this trilogy is Super Return of the Jedi, which begins in a similar way the film did, with Luke needing to collect a bunch of coins while jumping his land speeder over these inexplicable canyons. What, that happened in the film, didn't it? Oh yeah, the character select is back, baby, and this time you get to play as Leia. When I played this game as a kid, Leia's sweet double jump attack made me want to learn professional baton twirling. Jabba's palace has this really cool foreground art that makes it feel like you're being watched by all his weird hedonistic friends. These games may have been cheap as hell with the difficulty, but they definitely put the work in creatively. Speaking of difficulty, it looks like JVC recognized how agonizing they made the last entry and made this one a little easier. So rather than Sarlacc monster or a giant wampa, your first boss will just be this pathetic little wizard.
Abracadaniel!
Luke's back and more powerful than ever. He's got super speed, super lightsaber throwing, and super restraint. No more sister kissing for this Jedi Knight. The Rancor fight plays out a little different than in the film. This time, you can take a go at him with either Han or Chewie. Oh, shoot the Rancor with a giant blaster. Why didn't Luke just do that? That would have made things so much simpler. Jabba's sail barge was pretty much destined to be a level here. This is the first time the story justifies jumping on moving platforms while dozens of enemies swarm you. Enemies like these little Shizors from Shadows of the Empire. Little Shizor, walking down the street, little Shizor. The boss here is some sort of terrifying gorilla cockroach, because Luke already killed the Sarlacc in Super Star Wars, which lends more credence to my alternate timeline theory, by the way. Inside the sail barge is its own level, and you'd be a fool not to pick Leia for this one. She's in her gold bikini, and she whips around a freaking Morning Star. Forget choking Jabba out, she could just bash his Muppet head in with this thing. Jabba's got some new moves of his own here too, namely, spitting out live frogs at you. You know, because he ate a frog in the movie. JVC didn't let any detail go to waste. They milked these films like Luke milked that space cow in the one film we don't talk about. The speeder bike chase is a really good use of pseudo 3D, although as someone that gets motion sickness really easily, this level made me want to projectile vomit my breakfast, worse than watching that scene from the movie we don't talk about despite me referencing it 2 times already. If you ever thought the pacing in Return of the Jedi was weird and uneven, like for example having all the main characters spend the first half of the film rescuing Han, and then having him not really be all that important for the rest of the movie, well, then you're gonna love playing as Wicket, clearing random-ass monsters and bugs out of his Ewok village. Is this village infested with critters because of the Empire's occupation? They're probably not connected at all, but let's spend some time with this detour anyways. It's hard to tell if the writers for the cutscenes weren't English speakers or if they were just trying to fit within a word limit, but either way, it's given us gems like, "But why must you confront him? He is evil." I think you just answered your own question, Leia. "But why must I eat the sandwich? I am hungry." This is the rebel who surrendered to us. He killed like 30 of our men before surrendering. He even defeated our giant death robots beforehand, so he didn't need to surrender, but clearly intended to do so from the start. So basically, he just killed scores of our men for no real reason. I think he might just enjoy the killing. He's a real sick son of a bitch. Because this is a video game, everything needs to be made into a boss fight, including the shield generator on Endor. Inside, Luke fights Vader again, and Vader's armor is still reflecting the lighting from the Cloud City carbon freezing chamber. A small detail I would wager that no one else in the world gives a shit about, and yet it consumes me with rage and frustration. One way Super Return of the Jedi outdoes its source material is that this time around, Luke gets to actually take a swing at the Emperor. Unfortunately, Palpatine put all of his experience points into his avoid skill, and also he could dab like a 2015 boss. I love how Vader's mask just flies off here. The escape from the Death Star feels like a f***ing acid trip, but I gotta hand it to JVC. They never used the pseudo 3D effect the same way twice, so that's pretty creative. The game ends, much like the Super Empire Strikes Back, with a haunted face staring right at you and devouring the innocence from your soul. If Star Fox 64 is any indication, this floating Palpatine face is the game's way of telling us that we didn't get the true ending. But considering there was never a Super Force Awakens, it's just a big tease. Somehow Palpatine returned, and he's learned how to dab. Well, that was the Super Star Wars Trilogy. 3 great games, forgotten by time, but not by me. Sure, they're unnecessarily difficult and 90% of the levels are on Tatooine, but what other Star Wars game lets you do this? Or this. Or even this. If you like this video, please hit the like button and leave a comment. It really helps a lot with the algorithm and getting me the views I need for my videos to succeed. I've got more Star Wars content coming out soon, and I'm on my way through the completely futile and ill-advised mission of playing every Star Wars game ever made. If you want to watch my attempt at this, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, join my Patreon, goodbye.
Success!